What's good, y'all? We back at it again. Welcome back to the channel. Today I got another learning session for y'all. Now, there are hundreds of stocks in the stock market, so it's virtually impossible to keep up with every single one, nor should you. To build wealth for yourself and to become a successful investor, you only need 5 to 10 quality stocks. But how do you narrow down hundreds of stocks at just 5 or 10? In this video, I'm going to show you a simple but effective way to find quality stocks to build your own watch list and start your investing journey. By the end of this video, you'll know how to search for and find quality companies to invest in. So get your notepad back out and tap in for some free game. Let's get this money, y'all. Now, before we get started, a quick disclaimer. This content is intended to be used for informational or educational purposes only. These are not formal investment recommendations. These are just my opinions on things that I see in the market. Please do your own research and only make investment decisions based on your own personal circumstances. So now that we have that out the way, let's jump into it. I'm going to pull up my screen. All right, you should be seeing the Yahoo Finance home screen. So for the sake of this video, we're going to go to this markets tab, and then we see we get a drop down when we hover over it. And then we're going to go here to where it says sectors. Now, when you click on sectors, you should see a screen that looks something like this. The first thing to note is that the S&P 500 has 11 sectors, or 11 categories that the stocks within it are broken down into. And those 11 sectors are technology, financial services, consumer cyclical, communication services, healthcare, industrials, consumer defensive, energy, basic materials, real estate, and utilities. And within those 11 sectors, there are 145 industries. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go into each one of those individually. I'm going to focus on the top 5. And here's why. If we look at this column here, market weight, this shows you how much of the S&P 500 is made up by this particular sector. So looking at technology, about 29.4% of the S&P 500 are technology stocks, about 15.5% are financial services stocks, and so on. Now, if we add up these top 5 sectors here, technology, financial services, consumer cyclical, communication services, and healthcare, they add up to about 70%. So more than half of all stocks within the S&P 500 live within these 5 sectors here. And if we and that number, 70%, is more than double the next 6 sectors combined. Now, why is that? These top 5 sectors are the most essential to our way of life. They tend to be the fastest growing sectors and often the most profitable. So technology, there isn't a single day that goes by where we don't use technology. We have a smartphone in our pocket at all times. Financial services, people will always need loans and people will always need somewhere to house their money. Consumer cyclical, people like to shop. There will always be things to spend money on and people will always spend it. Communication services, people always have to communicate with each other, and companies want to communicate with consumers to sell their products. And then lastly, healthcare. As long as diseases exist and as long as people get sick, there will always be a place for healthcare. So these 5 sectors tend to be the fastest growing and the most profitable sectors of the S&P 500. Now, a very simple and effective method to find great quality companies to build a watch list is to look within the top 5 sectors, look within the top 2 industries in that sector, and pick no more than 1 stock from each industry. So I'm going to show you an example. Let's click on technology, and now we'll see the industries within the technology sector. So each one of these industries has a block to its name, and the size of that block shows how much it makes up that particular sector. So if we hover over semiconductors, for example, we see that 30% of all technology stocks in the S&P 500 are semiconductor stocks. Looking at software infrastructure, 28.6% of all technology stocks are software infrastructure. So we clearly see that these are the top 2 industries. So let's click into one as an example. When you click one of these industries, the first thing you'll see is a chart here. Now, this chart compares the industry's performance to the S&P 500's performance over a certain period of time. Now, if you remember in my last video, I said that it's best practice to see how an industry or a stock has performed over a long period of time. So we're going to look at this 5-year chart. Now, we see that the S&P 500 is this yellow line here. So looking at the S&P 500, it's returned 92.6% over the past 5 years, which is a great return. That means you would have almost doubled your money in 5 years. But look at the semiconductor industry, 411% return in the past 5 years. That is more than quadruple what the S&P 500 has returned, And there's a reason for that. So we're going to scroll down and we're going to see a list of companies that live within this industry. Now, these companies are listed in order by size based on how much they're valued at. So we're looking at this market cap section here. NVIDIA is worth $3.5 trillion. If you remember my last video, I said that market cap is the number of shares outstanding, which are shares that are available to be bought and sold by regular investors like you and me, times the company's share price at any given time, and that will give you how much the company is valued at. So NVIDIA is valued at $3.5 trillion, and it has been fluctuating as the most valued company in the world, but it's certainly top 3. But look at this market weight column right here. 59.3% of the weighting of semiconductor stocks is from NVIDIA. So another way to put that is 59% of the semiconductor industry's performance comes from NVIDIA. That means that NVIDIA is leading the charge in this particular industry, and for good reason. Another thing I want to point out is this column here that says year-to-date return. This shows you how much this company has returned from January 1st to today. So we see that NVIDIA has returned 7%. This is after the big drop after Trump announced the tariffs. So even after that big drop, NVIDIA has still produced a positive return for this year. And then lastly, this last column, average analyst rating. This shows what investment professionals like analysts at JP Morgan, at Goldman Sachs, etc., feel about the stock at any given time. So they give a rating in one of 5 categories: strong buy, hold, sell, and strong sell, with strong buy being the most optimistic, obviously. So we see that NVIDIA has a strong buy rating, meaning that investment professionals are very optimistic about the stock's performance over a long period of time. And just really quickly, I'm going to click into NVIDIA just so you can see why and how it's performed over a long period of time. So looking at this 5-year chart for NVIDIA, NVIDIA has returned 1,400% over the past 5 years, which is incredible. NVIDIA has widely been one of the top performing stocks, especially among large companies over the past 5 years. So there's a reason why investment professionals are so optimistic about the stock. Now, I'm going to use another sector as an example. So let's go to financial services. We see that 20% of financial services stocks are banks, and about 16% of financial services stocks are credit service companies. So these are clearly the top 2 industries within this sector. So let's use credit services companies, for example. Looking at the chart, we see that over the past 5 years, the credit services industry has not outperformed the S&P 500. However, it has still performed. It has still produced a positive return of 50%. So even though that's below the S&P 500, it's still a positive return, which means an average return of 10% per year. So let's scroll down and see where that performance is coming from. Again, let's look at the market weight. We see that 39% of the industry's performance comes from Visa, and 29% comes from MasterCard. So about 70% of this industry's performance comes from these 2 companies, and there's a reason for that. So Visa and MasterCard essentially have a monopoly over the payment network system. So every time you swipe your debit or your credit card, Visa or MasterCard's payment system takes the money from your bank account, transports it through their service to whatever company or industry that you're buying a product or service from. Visa and MasterCard manage more transactions than any other company in the world. And we can see that Visa is valued at $655 billion. MasterCard is valued at $489 billion. And we see that both of these companies have produced a positive return, even with the drop after Trump's tariffs. And they both have a buy rating by analysts. So these are both strong companies, and they make up 70% of the industry. So that just shows you how strong these companies are for most of the weighting to go to just 2 companies. And the next closest competitor is only 12.6%. So these are both strong companies, and they're shown by how much they're weighted within their particular industries. And I'm going to show you one more. Let's do communication services. So we see that within communication services, the largest industry by far is internet content and information. And if we hover over it, we see that 63.6% of all communication services stocks are internet content and information companies. So let's click in to see where most of the performance is coming from. Quickly looking at the 5-year chart, we see that it has just outpaced the S&P 500, returning 118% over the past 5 years, compared to 92.6% for the S&P 500. So just above it, but not by much. But let's look at where that performance is coming from. Number one is Google, valued at $2 trillion. And number two is Meta, valued at $1.7 trillion. But look at this market weight. 50% of the industry's performance comes from Google, and 42.6% comes from Meta. So 92, almost 93% of the industry's performance comes from just two stocks. That should show you how much investors and investment professionals are optimistic about these stocks. Now, we see that Google has a negative return for the year. The reason for that is because Google is facing some competition with the recent AI chatbots that have come up. So search is waning, but the thing about Google is Google has other ways of generating revenue. Not only do they have Google, the search engine, they also own YouTube, the #1 most used app around the world, and they have cloud computing software. So when you want to save things to the cloud, Google provides, I believe, that the 3rd largest cloud computing software company. And number 2 is Meta. Meta owns Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp, 3 of the top 5 most used apps around the world. And they own Oculus, the VR goggles, and they own the Ray-Ban VR glasses that a lot of people have been buying recently. And we see that Meta does have a positive return. And then look at these average analyst ratings. Analysts rate Google as a buy, and analysts rate Meta as a strong buy. So this just shows you what the investment professionals, people that get paid to do research on these stocks, feel about these companies' prospects over the next few years. Analysts are still optimistic about these companies. But again, let's go back to this market weight. Look at the next closest company in this industry, 3.5%. So a lot of the weighting goes to Google and Meta because they have been so successful over the past few years. Just quickly, I'm going to click into Meta just to show you how much Meta has returned over the past 5 years. Looking at 5 years, 185%. You almost would have tripled your money by investing in Meta 5 years ago. So that just shows you how strong of a company Meta is, and how much investment professionals are optimistic about their performance going forward. So that was a very quick and effective way to find quality companies. I want you to test this out. I want you to go in, I want you to use this method. I want you to look at the top 2 industries within the top 5 sectors that I just pointed out. Again, those are technology, financial services, consumer cyclical, communication services, and healthcare. So yeah, that wraps up another video. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. I hope y'all learned something new. If you enjoyed this video or you learned something new, please drop a like. Let me know in the comments some stocks that you guys found using this method. I want you guys to, become more familiar with how people use these tools to find great companies. And I want you to start getting into practice of finding your own companies to manage your own portfolio and become a successful investor to build wealth for yourself. So if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. I'll be dropping more videos just like this, and make sure you hit that bell so you never miss another video. And I hope I'm gonna catch y'all next time. So again, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Peace, y'all.